Lights was a quarterly fan magazine devoted to Elton John that my friend Bruce Dill subscribed to. And Bruce was the first person I'd ever come in contact with whose love for Elton's music was on par with my own. And naturally, we became fast and devoted friends. As it turned out, he was also a serious Christian who, in between debating weighty topics with me like Elton's best and worst ever tours, he would occasionally try to engage me on the topic of faith and God in an attempt to overcome what he realized were my agnostic, atheistic leanings at the time. And those efforts didn't meet with much overt success at the time. But he called me excitedly one day in the early summer of 1994 to tell me that this fan magazine, East Lights, was hosting a gathering that they were calling an Elton John Expo in Atlanta on August 19th and 20th, and he thought that we should both attend. And, Elton was going to be performing in Atlanta on that weekend, and guests at the expo were going to include Elton's longtime guitarist, Davy Johnstone, and his former drummer, Nigel Olsson, as well as the producer of all his earliest and best albums, Gus Dudgeon. So, it took me about 5 seconds to agree to go. And it was a great event that attracted somewhere near, I think, 160 fans from all over the world. Tremendous warmth and humor and a feeling of belonging among the people there. There's a certain psychological relief to being in a room full of people who share your particular brand of insanity. So we had a nice dinner banquet and question and answer session with the guests. And the event was capped on the night of the 20th with what was billed as a jam session, where people who played instruments were invited to go up and play and lead the entire group in sing-alongs. There were a number of pianists there who played to appreciative applause, and my friend Bruce waited a respectable time and then insisted that I go up and play. And because it was such a joy to share this music for the first time with a room full of very appreciative people, I uncharacteristically didn't need much coaxing to go up. And I think I started with Gray Seal, and without exaggerating or intending to sound immodest, the response to my playing was exceptionally vociferous and enthusiastic. Playing a song called One Horse Town. It's got a lot of long instrumental stretches, and I had worked out quite a flashy solo piano arrangement for it. Very different from what Elton John plays on the record, because I was attempting to cover multiple instrument parts. And, there was loud rhythmic clapping and whoops and hollers and so forth during the performance. And then when I finished, the entire room stood up and shouted and whistled and stomped their feet even, a truly stunning display of appreciation. And I remember thinking this must be a little what it's like for Elton himself when he comes out on stage and, there's 20,000 people roaring for him.
You tell me there's an angel in your tree. Did he say he'd come to call on me?
I knew there were other pianists and musicians who wanted to play, and I didn't want to monopolize time at the piano, so I think I stopped after about 5 songs. And a steady stream of people were coming up to me for the next 30 minutes, introducing themselves, complimenting my playing, asking me if I would return to the piano. And that sideshow actually got to be, I felt, distracting to the musicians who were then performing. So I discreetly agreed to go with a handful of other attendees out to an area off the lobby of the hotel where this event was taking place, and there was another piano there. And then I started playing basically requests. Any song that anybody would mention, I'd play, including many I had never actually learned, but just played extemporaneously by ear. And before long, other people from the expo happened by, and even strangers in the hotel that heard the music started showing up. I remember they put a jar on the piano, and people started putting money in it, and there was this one guy who put a $20 bill in there if I would play Funeral for a Friend, so made a little cash as well. Sometime during all this, I noticed a mid-50s woman with a British accent in the crowd, and she was extremely enthusiastic over my playing and was making her own requests and just raving after each song. And I remember that one of the event organizers whispered to me, "You know who that is, don't you?" And I said no, and he said, "That's Sheila Dudgeon, Gus Dudgeon's wife." And the thing I remember most when he told me that is that I was completely calm. This woman was in and around the studio when albums like Goodbye Old Brick Road and Honky Chateau and Captain Fantastic, were being recorded. And having this kind of opportunity, to play in front of somebody in or close to the inner circle of Elton John was something I would have dreamed about as a 12 or 13-year-old. And yet I was there doing it at 30 years old and was completely calm. And at one point she sat down next to me and introduced herself and asked me, what are you doing with your talent? Why aren't you recording or performing? And, she asked me if I had a tape or a CD of any kind that she could give to her husband, who was sleeping in his hotel room. I think he maybe had a few too many, but I felt chagrined somehow that I had nothing to offer her. I had no demo tape, no CD, and really no shorthand explanation for why I was essentially what she called wasting my talent. And I had no easy explanation anyway for why I had lost whatever musical ambition I once had. Anyway, this little impromptu concert continued till about 4 a.m. when everybody finally decided it was time to quit. And I remember stopping by the ladies' room in the lobby, and I remember having the urge to vomit in there for some reason, but quelled it successfully. And, I hadn't eaten anything that should have caused that, so I don't really know, I didn't understand at the time why that should have happened. But I successfully warded off the nausea and went up to my hotel room. Thought actually about calling my parents to report the excitement of meeting Sheila Dudgeon and what she had said to me and so forth. But I didn't want to scare them at that hour, so I went ahead and got in bed, tired but still very much alive from the whole experience of the evening. I had not laid down for more than 2 minutes when suddenly I was impelled to sit up in bed by an ineffable, intangible presence or force in the room. I immediately, startled, rapid heartbeat, looked around, and there was nothing untoward, nothing out of the ordinary in the room. There was a little bit of light coming through around the edge of the curtains, so I could see enough to see that there was nothing in the room. And then, almost immediately, a stream of words started forming in my consciousness in a rhythmical pulse, as if almost synced to a metronome. And with each word, each time a new word would enter my consciousness, a pulse of laser-like purple light would sear into my forehead from outside of me. And with each pulse of light and each formation of a word in my consciousness, I would feel a burning sensation right here at the forehead. So the effect was almost as if there was a brand that was branding these words into my consciousness, and one at a time, again, rhythmically. It's important to note that there was never an actual physical light in the room. I mean, I was completely aware of the reality of my surroundings at all times, and there was no basis in physics for this light, in the sense that if somebody else had been in the room, I doubt they would have sensed it, but it was completely sensed by me as if it were real, yet paradoxically at the same time I knew that it wasn't emanating from the room. There was no audible voice saying the words to me. It was really just the words themselves being revealed to my mind one at a time. I only remember verbatim one part of it, but I do remember the gist of the entire message. And it essentially was one of consolation that was attempting to assuage my guilt and my shame at my circumstance in life. It told me that I wasn't to blame myself for not following a traditional career path. I was not meant to be a star, quote unquote, as my mother might have thought, or this woman downstairs might have thought, or that I might have even thought at one time. I wasn't here to be a star in that sense. I was here to be, I remember it told me, here to be a star for my family, a beacon for my family to lead them to Him. And of course, by this time, tears are just, streaming down my face, because each time these words are forming in my mind, the same pulse of purple light is piercing my forehead and burning my forehead. And the only part of the message I remember verbatim then came to me. It said, "I died for you, can't you live for me?" And at that point, I asked, not audibly, not out loud, but to myself, I said, "Who is talking to me?" And the response was not verbal this time. There was no words, but it was even more powerful than if it had been. My arms, as if controlled completely by a puppet or puppeteer, as if I were a puppet, my arms rose 180 degrees out from the sides of my body, drooping at the wrists like this, and my head involuntarily drooped to the side. All of this completely involuntarily, as if controlled by some force outside of myself. And when that happened, of course, I knew that the voice, the force that was talking to me was Christ. And my body was just racked with sobs, and my arms stayed out actually for a while. I don't remember exactly how long. I would estimate the entire encounter probably took, 2 to 3 minutes. But it instantly, obviously, changed my life forever.
Someone says